In this video, we'll start talking about law and ethics and privacy. Three concepts that are very closely related, but they are clearly not the same. It is important to have a good understanding of both because they do come up on a very regular basis. Especially if you start getting professionally involved with cybersecurity, you want to know what is allowed and what isn't allowed within the constraints of the law. Now, law means a lot of different things in a lot of different places. But let me start by doing a disclaimer here. I am not a lawyer. I have never been a lawyer. And as it stands now, I will never be a lawyer. So whatever this video is, it is not legal advice. Secondly, for the sake of simplicity and understanding, I will take some shortcuts. And some of those shortcuts might make lawyers cringe. I'm doing them to establish a basic level of understanding of how the legal system works, but not to provide an in-depth knowledge and understanding. At Delphi University offers additional courses, most notably maybe in this aspect, it would be cyber ethics and cyber law. Those are two different courses that are being taught on a very regular basis. And anyone who's interested in this material should check those courses out. So having said that, what I'll focus on here is the legal system in the United States, and in particularly in New York State, where we are located. So in a very rough division, you might say the law separates civil law from criminal law. Civil law is all about disputes between individuals. It's all about liabilities and contracts and awarding damages to victims if one of the parties in an agreement does not do what they are supposed to be doing. And that means that the worst case scenario in a civil disagreement is pretty much you get a fine. Now, those fines can be very hefty, especially here in the US, where people tend to fine pretty heavily. But it's not going to send you to jail. It's not going to get you arrested. So there's that. And because the consequences are relatively low, the burden of proof that is required for you to be found guilty under civil law is also relatively low. In other words, if there is a preponderance of evidence, it is more than 50% certain that some bad event happened because of something you did or did not do, and that could be 50% plus a feather, and then you are likely to be convicted under civil law. It's a fairly low burden of proof. All you have to do is, tip the scale a little bit in one direction. That's not the case when we're dealing with criminal law. Criminal law can get you sent to jail, or in the states that still have it, capital punishment that might lead you to being convicted to death. It's all about breaking the law. That also means that since the consequences are potentially more severe under criminal law than they are under civil law, the burden of proof is also much higher. 50% isn't good enough to get someone convicted under criminal law. You need to be beyond reasonable doubt. Now notice that it does not say that it has to be certain. You can almost never be certain of anything, and especially when it comes to things like breaches of crimes. But if you can convince a jury of peers, allegedly, that no one who has reasonable doubt would dispute that you broke a particular law or multiple laws, they can convince you. In the United States, we have different levels of legislation. At the highest level, we have the US federal laws. Under that sit US state laws. Under that sit local laws. It is a misconception to say that federal laws always trump state laws. And actually, it's almost the other way around. Any right that isn't specifically assigned to the federal government belongs to the states. And so in many cases, states are more powerful than the federal government is. It is confusing though. You have to be aware of state law, you have to be aware of federal law, and in many cases you also have to be aware of local laws. Each three of those can set their own laws and regulations. On top of that, there are a whole bunch of different special legislative districts that have ability to set rules and regulations as well. For example, the fire marshals can set rules and regulations in terms of building safety. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, can set rules and legislation regarding drugs and food issues. So there's a lot of different agencies that are able and capable of making laws. And as a citizen, you are required to know all of them. In one of the previous videos, and maybe it was the first one, I have to look back, we said that who are our opponents? What's driving them? And if we know what's driving them, how we can figure out how can we deter them? And we said one of them would be criminals. Criminals would be people who are often out for easy gain and don't want to get caught because they don't want to go to jail. And here we go, cybercrime, the criminals. So there is a relationship there. In the United States, the Department of Justice has thought about this for a bit, and they came up with cybercrime as one of three categories, or maybe even in some cases belonging to multiple categories. In the first one, the computer is the target of the attack. And that means that an attacker might be specifically looking for a computer, for the data that is stored on the computer, or for things that that computer can control. Secondly, we have the computer as a storage device. What's on there? Are we looking at stolen passwords? Are we looking at creditor data? Are we looking at personal identity information? And then lastly, the computer as a communications device. Can we use this computer to communicate with someone else or maybe stage another attack? Cybercrime is hard to understand. Legal systems are bound by national boundaries or by state boundaries, but cybercrime is not, or in general, crime is not. And that means that under an international convention of cybercrime, we distinguish 10 types of cybercrime. And they're listed here on the slide. So illegal access, interception, data interference, system interference, misuse of devices, computer-related forgery or fraud, offenses related to child pornography, copyright infringements, and of course helping people commit other crimes. In an international framework, those are the main categories of laws that we're dealing with. And we'll explore those to see what it means for us specifically at a later time. So in summary, what we're looking for is laws related to computers, whether those laws are dealing with the computer as a target, the computer as a storage device, or the computer as a communications device. It doesn't really matter. In the US, we're dealing with civil law and criminal law, and each one of those has their own ins and outs, and we'll explore those in the next couple of videos.